back to Storytime with Dave Booker. Today we're going to continue on with a few more chapters a couple of chapters of Soleman, and we're getting almost to the end. So let's start with at the conference. One of the enjoyable aspects of any conference are the free giveaways scattered throughout the main hall. Demonstrations galore of innovative technologies, new means of non-lethal apprehension, and alternative ways of fighting were all there for the asking. Perry was amazed at all the technology and gathered all the pamphlets he could stuff into his plastic bag. Oedipus headed for the methods of non-lethal apprehension, since he and Perry were against the use of lethal means. Pedowski was drawn to the new methods of fighting. He was a decent boxer and wrestler, but some of the martial arts were a closed book. As he watched the sparring, he realized having a broad range of fighting styles would allow you to meet a wide range of threats. After their last encounter, they had decided to master as many fighting styles as they could. Perry decided that a little sparring would be fun, so he changed into sweats and entered the ring. Partnered with Oedipus, they participated for an hour and lost every match. Perry and Oedipus had been rudely tested in actual combat several times, but this was different. This was about the challenges in apprehending armed and dangerous criminals. It required more definitive knowledge that the two just didn't have. Here they discussed approach, immobilizations, more precise pressure points, and ways of maneuvering uncooperative criminals. Having taken their lumps, they changed back in civilian clothes and paid attention and learned. Perry determined to set up a padded ring in their sanctum to practice daily the new skills they were witnessing. After lunch, they attended the discussions on the new laws that were being enacted and what they meant for the population and for the officers who were intended to enforce them. By the end of the day, their heads full of knowledge and Perry noted his body full of sore muscles and bruises, a late dinner and wash, and they slept deeply, weary from the day's activities. Deciding that a discussion on criminal investigation would be enlightening, the three went to the main conference room. At the table were three distinguished panelists holding forth in the past, present, and future. The past was an interesting exposition on crime detection and deterrence during the 18th and 19th century up to the 20th. They dealt with the changes in the criminal element both here and abroad. Their lecture covered a great deal of information, too much in Perry's estimation. Their thin voice was weak, and it was only by consumption of vast quantity of coffee and other stimulants that the audience was able to stay engaged, not to mention awake. Out of sheer mind-stupefying boredom and seeking a diversion, Perry reached under his seat and carefully and quietly opened a newspaper. Their hotel, with advance notice of the home locations of its guests, had graciously procured local papers for them. Perry had gotten his copy upon departure for the conference. The front page was headed with what papers called a screamer, announcing the theft of a Van Gogh from the Art Museum. He read the article with interest. June 15th, a painting of Schoenen, or Shoes, by Dutch master Vincent van Gogh, was stolen from the Foothill Art Museum at 12 Arch Avenue. The estimated time of the theft appears to have been between 9 p.m., when the museum closed, and 10 a.m., when the first workers arrived. Since the floors are pressure sensitive, it is unknown how the theft took place. As of this moment, the museum is closed for the police to investigate the robbery. According to Commissioner Willington, they have not found anything to identify the means and person or persons involved. Perry was irritated that he was at the conference and unable to view the scene. He tried to picture the museum and how the crime could have been committed. He handed the article to Oedipus and Pedowski, who also regretted being away. In the interim of reading and speculating on the article, the speakers had changed. The new speaker was Detective Saunderson, and he was discussing current methods of detection and investigation. Let's look at a current incident and then discuss findings or the lack of them. Does anyone have a copy of today's newspaper? Several people, including Perry, raised a hand. The speaker asked them to stand. Those who are standing, please go through the paper and see if you can find any criminal investigations underway. Several were found and were of the common knocking over of a convenience store or a trifling robbery. Perry announced that he had a theft of some consideration. He read the article out loud. The speaker applauded. Perfect! Is that a local or distant paper? Perry informed that it was a local and only half an hour away. He brought the paper up and the speaker asked the members to excuse him for a moment. When we returned, he was rubbing his hands gleefully. I've just spoken to the chief of police for Foothills County. It's only a short distance away. The police have sealed the museum, but have finished their examination of the facility. We're being allowed access to perform our own investigation. Whatever we discover will be brought to the chief's attention. I boarded a van to take us there, and the guard is on duty to let us in. If anyone's interested, meet out front in 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, 9 people, including Pedowski, Perry, and Oedipus, were on the van headed for town. On the way, most slept. A couple finished reading their paper, and Perry and Oedipus were practically bouncing in their seat. Pedowski was amused at how excited they were to be out detecting once more. From the looks on their faces, anyone would think they were headed for Disneyland. On the ride down, Detective Saunderson broke the group down into threes. Fortunately, Perry and company were sitting in the rear of the van and were picked last as the final trio. Once the teams were set, he explained the procedure that they would follow. Each team will be stationed in one of 3 positions. One outside. You will try and determine which door they entered from, how, and did they exit that way. The next position is in the reception area where the alarm is. They shut down the alarm, and the third is in the gallery, where the painting was stolen from. The gallery may tell something about how the painting was removed and from which direction. Team 1 will take the gallery first, Team 2 the alarm, and you 3 in back will take outside. You have 30 minutes to determine all you can. After that, we'll switch and Team 1 will take outside, Team 2 gallery, Team 3 the alarm. After another 30 minutes, we will switch a final time. And if you don't know which position to move to by the final switch, you shouldn't be police. The group laughed. After the final switch, we'll take a 2-hour lunch break, and you can go over your findings with your team. Once we meet back in the auditorium, each team will give their findings. Hidden by the seat in front of them, Pedowski, Oedipus, and Perry were holding their hands out and above each other's in a show of mutual respect and support. Arriving at the gallery, the guard showed them around, being careful not to disturb anything. The group broke up, and went to their initial stations. Detective Saunderson brought out a stopwatch, and once everyone was in place, set it and pushed the plunger. You're off, he shouted, and everyone began their investigation. That's the next chapter, investigation. Oedipus requested the lead in the first portion. He directed Perry to check the rear of the facility while he and Pedowski would tackle the front. Perry was back in moments. The door in back had a pulled-down gate that had seldom been used. The rust was undisturbed and would need a good oiling before it could be opened again. He looked around the rest of the building for any other way of gaining entrance and determined the front door was the most probable access used. As Perry had been doing his examination, Oedipus was doing his, with Pedowski writing down his findings. I see 2 separate scratches at upper center and lower base of the lock. I believe a picklock was at work here since the discoloration is new. Next, he examined the door frame. A slight bead of moisture under one of the bolts at the side caught his attention. Wiping it with his handkerchief, he found it to be oil. Whipping out a multi-purpose tool, he folded it into pliers and removed one of the bolts. It slid out easily. Opening the door, he saw recent scratches on the sides, the lack of discoloration indicating age. I'd say that once the door was unlocked, it was removed. They may have thought the picture was overlarge and removed the door for swifter egress. On the way down, I looked up the size of the picture, and it's small. One person could carry it out under their arm with ease. Therefore, this scratch was made by something used for the robbery, but not connected with the entry. Pedowski and Perry swiftly re-examined his findings and confirmed them. They congratulated him on astute observations and inferences. A shrill whistle sounded, and the 3 moved into the reception area while the other 3 redistributed themselves. Pedowski asked for the honor of doing this investigation, leaving the actual theft for Perry. Pedowski was able to see that a standard box key of almost any sort would open the alarm door. The alarm, though one of the best, was simple to turn off. He closed the door without gaining much insight. The big question in his mind was how someone was able to traverse a pressure-sensitive floor to turn the alarm off. The ceiling was high with no handholds, the walls rough textured, so suction cups were out. He looked at the alarm again and noticed that the pressure was based on one square only. If a way was found to traverse with the weight distributed over a large enough area, it might be possible to go from door to alarm without setting off any sensors. Going back to the door, he examined the scratches. These are 6 inches from the floor. The mark is regular and half an inch thick. He lay down on the floor. Perry handed him a magnifying card he had picked up at one of the stalls. I see minute indentations similar to pinpricks, uniformly spaced, with heavier indentations indicating the front and back of a square object. I would hypothesize that a board had nails driven through it and a way of fastening it to someone's feet. I would also suggest they were small and fairly light, since the indentations are faint and the tiles are soft cushioned material. They were wide enough that they could disperse the pressure over 2 or 3 plates. He looked up from his prone position. I got to guess I don't think the same person who picked the lock was wearing the planks. Well, that is, unless they had unusually long arms. I believe that we're working with a team. Harry and Oedipus had been following his reasoning and inspecting as he had been delineating his observations. Having come to the same conclusions, they checked their notes to ensure nothing was left out. Their team was doing well as far as they were concerned. "Final change," came the time's up call. Perry was now in the lead. First he did a cursory walk around and then walked to the back and retrieved the ladder. Detective Saunderson grinned when he saw Perry lugging a huge ladder. Nobody yet had done that. They had looked at the wall up to where the picture had hung and the floor, but nothing further. Perry began to call out his observation as he put the ladder in front of where the picture was. There was a thin line of dust from the entrance to the picture. He climbed the ladder, looking at the wall from top to bottom. There's a small indentation here above where the picture had been. I see 3 small round indentations about the size of small ball bearings. He climbed higher to look at the pipe near the ceiling. The dust came from the pipe. I could see tracks of something being dragged along it. Climbing down, he asked Oedipus to replace the ladder. When he returned, he found Perry with a magnifier examining the wall. The picture was simply hung and not secured. He double-checked everything, then got a longer ladder out. Coming closer to the entrance, he climbed up to check the pipe. Whatever was doing the pulling got this far and stopped. There's a slight scratch on the metal that is very thin. Stopping 8 feet from the entrance means something was used to pull the painting over to the entrance. Apparently they were concerned about leaving footprints. I would hazard that one of the group was an avid and expert fisherman. They made a long cast with heavy sinkers. They cast it over the water line with amazing accuracy and force. It hit the wall and dropped behind the painting. Picking it up via the wire, it was reeled in, lowered, reeled in some more, lowered again, and reeled in a final time, bringing it to where they could use a long pole hook to take the painting. Perry had finished his findings when lunch was called. The area where the museum was located was Pedowski's old stomping grounds. He took his friends to a deli that was small and almost hidden away, but the corned beef and rye was the best in town. Over lunch, they hashed out a great deal of their information. Pedowski was forming it into a collective narrative as they ate, and they were joined by Detective Saunderson. "I hope you don't mind me joining you." They all moved over to make room. He ate a bit, waiting for Pedowski to finish writing before he opened up his mind to them. "Fellas, you make one hell of a team. I've watched plenty of detectives working, but you folks beat them all. I want to ask you, though, how many people do you think were involved?" Oedipus and Pedowski looked over their notes while Perry closed his eyes. Oedipus and Pedowski figured 3 or 4. Very gently corrected this to 5. The detective smiled and asked why 4 and 5. Oedipus got a nod from Pedowski to speak for them. One at the door, one for walking to the alarm, and one fisherman. There may have been a leader with them, though it was they who were the brains of this operation. The detective looked at Perry. And your take on the 5th? Perry leaned on the table. The 5th was the big boss, the one who hired these people and are the go-between them and the buyer. Still grinning, the detective finished his sandwich while the 3 got up and headed back to the museum. In the auditorium, the 3 teams gathered, sitting together yet sitting apart from each other. All except Pedowski's group were looking smug. They were sure they had all the answers and were ready to show the rest how it's done. Detective Saunderson made a great show of setting the stage for the teams to do their explanations. The auditorium was darkened, a single spotlight shone center stage. Microphone placed center in the stand. Testing, testing. Okay, the mic's working. Team 1, the stage is yours. He extended his arm with a flourish and walked off stage, taking the center seat in the first row. Team 1 mounted the steps with firm strides. The looks of confidence became a little fixed, though, once they stepped into the spotlight. We're Team 1, Luke Walker, Pat Thompson, and Bert Paulson. We found the lock had been picked. The person walked along the wall to the alarm, then walked out with a painting under their arm. He lowered his notes and waited. Detective Saunderson let them sweat a little before cross-examination. Okay, granted they probably picked the lock, unless it was an inside job. How'd you determine which? Well, if it had been an inside job, police had a limited number of people and would in all probability found the culprit already. Okay, sounds good. You say they walked on the edge of the floor. I presume you mean the border? Bert nodded. I see the border is only an inch wide. The average shoe width is 4 inches. With that much over the edge, how could the criminals make it? They probably had exceptionally narrow feet, perhaps a female accomplice, or the criminal themselves was a female. Sorensen shrugged and had them proceed. Well, they had nothing further to add. All right, very well, Team 2, you're the next contestant on The Crime is Right. Come on down, he called out in imitation of Johnny Olson. Team 2 strode confidently up the steps, casting shade at Team 1 as they descended. Under the spot, they conferred on who would speak. They had chosen the youngest, and her voice cracked as she began. My name is Deborah Montgomery, and my teammates are Sam Pimeroff and John Hammond. We believe the evidence shows that more than one person committed this crime. Seeing a scratch marked by the inner portion of the door frame and small particles of wood also within the doorway, we feel that a thin, long board was placed at the far end and bent and wedged in the door frame. This allowed a lighter person to traverse the distance and shut off the alarm. The distance is only about 28 feet, and the board that its size is readily available at most lumber yards. Once the alarm was off, the other person got the painting, went out where the smoker then turned the alarm back on. They pulled the board out and returned to the yard the next day. She folded the paper and waited for questions. You said the distance from the door to the alarm is 28 feet. In order to wedge the plank and have enough distance to be elevated, the board would, in all probability, need to be a deal longer. How'd you figure that into the equation, and how much longer would the board have to be to have enough clearance? She looked to the older men behind her. They got out their phones and were making rapid calculations. The oldest spoke up. The plank would require another 2 feet, making a total of 30 feet. Detective Saunderson called the local lumberyard, asking if they carried boards 30 feet or more. The answer was negative, although they could special order one. It would take 2 weeks to get one in. He made another calculation and determined that since the scratch was half an inch thick, the board would be sufficiently pliable to do the job, and supposing a board of that size could be ordered early enough, he followed with his next question. The difficulty I see would be maneuvering the plank in and out without touching the floor. Once it got past the center, the weight would tend to be on the forward side and would be dragging on the floor before it reached the edge of the wall. Or do I have this wrong? Another consultation between all three, and they worked out the weight of the board at approximately 20 pounds. Well, not excessive for two people. Once past the tipping point, it would be difficult to maintain its elevation. Well, according to our calculations, it would only be managed with a plank of balsa wood. However, at that thickness and curved, it might carry sufficient weight. They looked again at their notes and tore them dejectedly, dropping them into a waste can on the way back to their seats. All right, Team 3, batter up! Oedipus was given the honors. We feel that the front door was picklocked, the same as everyone else. We looked at the rear entrance, but the rust would have prevented a quiet incursion. There was fresh oil on the hinges of the front door, denoting that the bolts had been removed in case the painting was larger than they were led to believe, and the door set aside. One of the criminals was wearing what we feel was two square or slightly rectangle boards with nails extending through them were at approximately the width of the door and which scraped the sides when entering. This gives us a good indication of the width. This would also allow them to step on enough of the panels without setting off the alarm. The next person was an expert fisherman capable of making an accurate long cast over the pipe and above the picture. There are marks in the wall that show that a weighted object was thrown. He reread his notes, apparently with having difficulty reading his writing. The line descended and the fisherman hooked the painting. It canted to the right, as is indicated by another indentation that is triangular when it hit the wall on being released. The line was reeled up and moved towards the entrance to the room. It rose and descended at least 3 times to traverse the distance. A pole hook was used to grasp the picture, and while still a good 5 to 8 feet from the entrance. The indications for this are a slight dust on the ground on the line from the picture to the entrance that stop at about 5 feet 6 inches. The dust stops and starts several times. There are also indications that a sharp object cutting into the pipe when the empty line was reeled back over the pipe. We figured that between 4 and 5 people were involved. The 5th was the person who hired them and was the go-between between the buyer and the criminals. He folded the paper and waited. Detective Saunderson had no questions and opened the floor for anyone else to ask them. Several people rose only to sit back down. Saunderson congratulated them on the thorough work they had done. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know which of these solutions is the correct one. I'm going to give all of them to the chief and let him decide. I'd like to point out one thing, though. One group only got down on their bellies and got out ladders. Details matter, and the more you are willing to dig in and get a little dirty, the better your analysis will be. As I said, I don't know if Team 3 had the right solution, but they had the most information to work from. Remember this always, details matter. Let's head back to the conference. As they made their way back to the back of the van, not one of the Team 3 showed any superiority or sign of gloating at the praise. They acted more as if it had just been a fun day out, and spoke about the excellent lunch they had had at the out-of-the-way deli. Of course, that didn't prevent a few scowls in their direction. All right, so the next one will be a collector beats feet and Big Toe gets stepped on again. So we'll do those 2. And then we got a couple more. So we still got a few to do. So that's it. That's all we'll be doing today. I look forward to seeing you on the next reading. So I hope you'll be here. Behind me, you can see a few of my books. All are available on Amazon or through Draft to Digital. Ebook, and there's some audiobooks out there and some more of the paperbacks. So I hope you'll go online, look for some, find something you like, because I've got humor, I have mysteries, I have some religious humor. That's where's my religious humor over here? Up here? No, wait. I put it. Religious. Okay, over here, down here, I've got shorts that have a little bit of everything. So, you've got options. So that's it. I look forward to seeing you again in our next reading. Hope you'll be here. Be good and be good to yourself. Have a good one.